Welcome back to the Mold Show. I'm your host, Adam Horn. My co-host, as always, Sean McGrath, and we have a special guest today. We teased it on our last episode, and I'd like to welcome Al Rabin to the Mold Show. Al, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on, Al. I'm not too involved with the consult side of things, and I know you've kind of reinvented that upfront consult call over the last 6-7 years or so.
Yep.
Since we started working with immune compromised clients, we used to just get a lot of calls for people that just wanted to come look at a little bit of water damage under the sink. So those calls didn't last very long, but we found a common theme with a lot of our clients being really sick, having these crazy, weird symptoms they've never dealt with before. Doctors call them crazy, family members calling them crazy. So you've really kind of reinvented that consult process to dive a little deeper and really figure out what's going on from these clients that we get that are sick. So I'm glad we can have you on so you can kind of explain that process a little bit.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I like you guys, have been here for quite a while and seen this industry, really, really grow, no pun intended, especially as far as not our knowledge base. I think a lot more people are aware that this is a real situation. Like you said, Sean, some people scoff at it and laugh at it, but for those who are affected, this is no joking matter. There's nothing to laugh about, especially when you're affected in your home where you spend a good amount of time, or the building you work in, or in the school your children are attending. So all those things, need to be taken seriously. And you guys are a little bit of a unicorn out there. I mean, there are people out there that do tests, but they don't get involved in the why. They come out, they take samples, they give lab results, and that's really their only role. There's no discussion of the why and why you should do something about it, and they leave that up to the individuals to make that determination. And for the most part, as a remediator, that's a pretty scary proposition, because then they're bringing a company in. They don't even know what or why they're having it done. And that's never where you want to be at, especially when you don't know anything about it. And so when you get somebody like you guys involved, and the education is incredible. So by the time a remediator like me or anybody in my industry talks to a client that you guys have spoken to, their knowledge base is exceptional. And a lot of times they're telling me what they want, and that is not normal for the most part. If when you talk to people who don't understand why it's even something they should take seriously, or they, their insurance company told them they need to get an estimate from a company, and they just don't know. So it's unique. Al, you are a mold assessor, right? You're a state licensed mold assessor here in the state of Florida and other states throughout the United States. Tell us a little bit about your background and what got you into doing this, and then ultimately, what your role is with certified mold assessments, and kind of how the process begins when they speak to you.
Yeah, so been assessor for around 15 years now.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of my best friends started businesses about 20 years ago, mold assessment companies, and spent quite a bit of time learning from them, going to courses around the country, getting certifications, getting licensed. Made a decision about 15 years ago to start our business, and it's really evolved a lot over the years. As Sean alluded to earlier, we've really taken a completely different direction with our company. About 6 years ago, dealing with health compromised clients.
Yeah.
In the old days, we'd get a lot of calls. Someone had a water event. Maybe they didn't feel well. They gave us a call. They wanted to know, how much it costs for testing to be done. As we learn more and more about what we do and why we actually come out to do assessments, we learn more from a health perspective. We've gone to a lot of courses. We've gone to a lot of medical conferences throughout the country each year, learning more and more from doctors going through certifications. A lot of it with the shoemaker trading. And when they came out of their conference, they'd spend some time at our booth with Sean and myself, asking us what our approach was in regards to inspections. And we had a chance to learn more and more about what they were looking for to help their patients. Because in the old days, we would perform an inspection. We had clients that didn't feel well. They would go to the traditional Western doctors. Many times they were given just medication or told that maybe they needed some help from a different perspective. We're given phone numbers to psychiatrists or psychologists.
Wow.
But over the last, 6 to 10 years, the integrative doctors, the functional doctors have really played a really big part in helping our clients, and we've been able to help their patients. So now when we get calls, a lot of the phone callers or the callers will start talking about, tell me a little bit about your approach for inspections. We need some testing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not feeling well. So we ask a lot of questions about their health, how long they haven't been feeling well, how long they've been living in their home. Are they seeing any type of doctor? If they're seeing an integrative doctor, what type of testing that they've had performed, what they might have tested positive for from a mold perspective or a mycotoxin perspective. So we really spend a lot of time learning more about their health situation. And then we start asking questions about the health of their home. How long have they lived in their home?
Yeah.
Can you share with us any type of water events that might have taken place? We ask a lot of questions about their windows, their roof, their HVAC system. The ventilation system plays a really important part of our client's health and our inspection. Ask a lot about any area where there's moisture possibilities, the showers, the vanities, the cabinets below the sink in the kitchen, what's going on in the attic. So get a lot of questions in regards to their home and any type of water event that they've had. After that, we really try to share with them what our approach is to the inspection. We take a very holistic approach. We want to understand what's causing the issue. Why do you have mold in your home? So we spend time doing a perimeter walk around the home because it's really important to protect your home from the outside influence.
Mm-hmm.
We look for water intrusion opportunities. This helps us spend more time in those particular rooms once we get into the home. And then in our final report that we provide to them, we provide a lot of strategies to help minimize potential water intrusion in the future.
Yeah.
After that, we like to have a little field trip through the home with our client. They show us around their home, but also point out areas that have had any history of mold or moisture issues through the years. Once we're done with the field trip, we'll do an inspection covering every room of their home. We do have a moisture meter. We are checking for elevated moisture in the building materials. But just as importantly, we play the old Sherlock Holmes looking for any clues for any prior type water event. It's critical not just to understand what might be active from a moisture event, but what happened prior as well.
Can't say enough how important that is. A lot of people that we work with, they've been told since the water event has been addressed, the source has been addressed, you don't have to worry about mold anymore. And
what do you mean? The insurance company says you have no mold.
I know.
You're good.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that sometimes that's where we find some of the worst colonies in the home. And,
Right.
by then, since the source has been addressed, the colony's all dried out. Spores are very brittle, easy for them to break apart from the colony, becomes lighter, turns into fragments, which are even smaller particles, easier to get up in the air and first inhale them, get in our bodies. So yeah, everybody out there, for your, if a family member tells you, there's no leak there anymore, it's fine. Couldn't be further from the truth. Those are some areas where we find some of the worst sources.
That's a good point.
Well, exposure comes in different ways, right? I mean, you just talked about the exposure to the spore, and there are a variety of ways it can make its way into your body. And then, Al was speaking about the mycotoxins. Maybe talk a little bit more about that in based on your discussions with your clients and the medical professionals, how those things can impact a person.
Yeah, so that's a good point. Yeah. Certain types of molds or species of mold are capable of producing a dangerous byproduct or chemical called a mycotoxin.
Mhm.
They can impact people in a lot of different negative ways. Everybody's impacted differently. Different types of mycotoxins impact people in different ways.
Right.
Again, back to what Sean pointed out is mold spores become dry. It's easier for them to go airborne and resonate through a home and eventually working its way into the ventilation system.
Yep.
It gets redistributed through the home. And back to the importance of knowing the history from a moisture perspective, we always use an analogy that it could rain really hard for a month in your neighbor's home. They could have a hole in their roof. All their pets could drown. They come back home. They make the repairs on the roof. Everything dries out. They have a mold assessor in 6 months later, and they're using their moisture meter, and everything's dry.
Yeah.
But they never had an inspection. They never had remediation. And after 2 to 4 hours, there's going to be bacteria growth. And after 24 to 72 hours, there's a very good possibility that you're going to have mold growth. So it is critical, again, to understand what's taken place from a prior perspective as well,
Yeah.
and understanding what types of mold are present and which ones are capable of producing mycotoxins. We also infrared scan each room, looking for temperature differential in the building materials.
Yep.
We have a little infrared, or actually a little endoscope camera that we use that plays a really big part of our inspection.
Yep.
It helps us get to areas that are very difficult to assess, including inside of wall cavities, inside of ceiling cavities, beneath vanity cabinets, any area that's difficult to get to, looking for, again, any prior or current type moisture or mold issue. We also have a hygrometer that we utilize going through the home, getting an understanding of what the relative humidity levels are throughout the home. It's critical, as you're aware of, to keep the relative humidity within the proper parameters in order not to create an environment conducive for mold growth. Going around the windows, looking for any breach that would allow the outside influence into the home. Looking at the window sills, the window framing. In the bathrooms, we're moisture mapping the shower floors, the shower walls, looking for any integrity loss in the tile or the grout that would allow water intrusion inside or below the shower as well. In the vanities, we're very thorough, looking for any evidence of water damage, whether it be prior or current, any types of moisture, staining, rust to the plumbing. Same comprehensive approach in the kitchen with the cabinetry below the sink, behind the refrigerator, around the dishwasher. Again, we spend a lot of time with the air handling unit. It is the lungs of the home.
Yep.
Any mold in the home eventually is going to aerosolize and infiltrate the intake.
I'm sure we'll have plenty of
unit, right, and gets redistributed back through the home.
I'm sure we'll have plenty of episodes dedicated just towards the HVAC system. It's such an important part of the home.
Yep.
That it deserves its own episode for sure.
Oh, no doubt about it. And for the, even if you don't have water damage events, it's a prime location for growth on its own, just because it is a wet, it's a moisture system. It's a system designed to cool and dry and filter your air. So inherently has a lot of moisture in it and around it, and can create, issues depending on where it's located, in a variety of different ways. Al, I'm glad you took some time to just talk about areas where you could potentially find it, or areas that are common areas to find it. Wet areas, plumbed areas, anywhere there's moisture or moisture can find its way into the environment, are obviously, areas where you could potentially have exposures.
Sure.
And as a remediator, that's where, we typically, see it after we opened up the space. It tells us a story. Why, here it is. We can see where the failure point is a lot of times. And, that's important for the homeowner, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to
repair your home after a water damage event if you haven't repaired the source of the issue in the first place. And whether it's your windows or your roof or a plumbed area, you have to not just for insurance purposes, but for your own knowledge. You got to figure out why it occurred, and then game plan intelligently to repair the area so it doesn't reoccur. Because it's one thing to have a remediation done, but it's a whole nother to solve the source issue and to build it back properly to ensure that you don't re-expose these areas to moisture.
And that's very true. Very important. You can have perfect remediation, but if you haven't taken care and addressed all the source areas, it's just going to happen all over again.
And I'm glad, Al, you brought up some of these other pieces of equipment other than just a moisture meter. We were talking about the history of the home a little while ago. And if things are dry, you have to have other pieces of equipment other than a moisture meter to help you chase, what could happen. And that's where an infrared camera can really help. If, say, insulation in a wall or ceiling's been wet, it's going to be matted down and compromised. So those hits could give us big clues. And certainly, you mentioned the endoscope camera, getting our cameras in those walls where there's been a history of water event, because usually you're going to find some sort of staining, some sort of moisture stain wicking up the drywall or framing. You're usually going to find evidence of mold somewhere in that wall.
Very true. And a big part of what's going on in the home is the attic, right? So we spend quite a bit of time in the attic. If there's been any type of water intrusion, often we'll see staining to the building materials, discoloration, suspect growth, water damage. Again, the ventilation is critical in the attic to keep the relative humidity, again, within the right levels in order not to create an environment conducive for mold growth. And again, you can have perfect remediation, bad ventilation, the occurrence takes place again. The ductwork is critical. If there's condensation to the ductwork, often there's either a breach to the ductwork or, again, high relative humidity in the attic. Again, that condensation promotes mold growth. So there's a lot of information that can be learned spending time in an attic. And this is an area that most home assessors or mold assessors don't like to spend a lot of time. But this is an area that's critical and really deserves a lot of attention.
As long as it's accessible, which isn't always the case.
That's very true.
But why would they make it accessible? It's not like you need to do maintenance on the lungs of your home, right? Out of sight, out of mind. And we all feel that way, I think, until you learn, you find out there's issues within the system, and then you never make that mistake again. I wasn't a homeowner before, and before I was an insurance adjuster, none of these things would have, or a mold assessor, none of these things would have had an impact on me. I wouldn't have known, and that ends up happening with a lot of our clients. I think once you're aware, you can't unring that bell. You realize you have the cardiovascular system for your house above your head, and nobody goes up there. And as long as the system's cooling, you think everything is functioning properly. Meanwhile, it's been falling apart, and it's a perfect breeding ground for all types of things like molds, anything that feeds off of moisture, and then a dirty, dusty environment. And I know as a remediator, I often tell people, that's where you need to focus a huge piece of your resources and towards figuring out how to correct the issues with your HVAC system. Finding a competent HVAC contractor who can evaluate and determine, can it be clean? Does it have to be replaced? Are some components cleanable, or some, are they not? And it's a place that it's very easy for molds to grow in. And like you said, we'll probably have several episodes that just focus on that, but it is important to emphasize how much that particular piece of the puzzle can impact the overall process.
And like you said, you're a first-time homeowner.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when this is all said and done, most of us feel like, and our clients feel like, they've got a master's degree, and maintaining a home properly and about mold.
Yep.
It's a great learning experience, and the key is to take that experience and carry it on to protect yourself and protect your home when this is all said and done. But based on what we learned during the assessment really dictates the sampling plan that we recommend. We're very strategic about our approach. We perform a lot of different type of sampling methodologies. There is no one perfect sample that gives us all the information we need from an environmental standpoint for the sources or remediation protocol for remediation companies, nor from a clinical standpoint for our clients to have for themselves and their doctors so that they better understand what's going on in their living environment and how that potentially could change the protocol from a clinical standpoint as well. We look at each sample and sampling methodology as a piece of a puzzle.
Yeah. It's a snapshot,
right? We put the whole puzzle together to come up with our conclusions and recommendations. That said, we do some air sampling in the ambient space. That helps us find potential hidden mold, potential cross-contamination areas throughout your home, and potential source areas that initiated the mold growth to begin with.
Yeah.
And that said, an air sample is a snapshot in time of what mold spores happen to be airborne for that 5-minute period in that portion of the room that we were taking our sample. And mold spores do follow the laws of gravity. They resonate through a home. They land, whether it be on a table, a chair, floor, clothing, bed, pillow, eventually into the ventilation system, and gets redistributed through the home. So, again, it's really important, since we can come in contact with mold through our eyes, our nose, our mouth, but also our skin, to have a really good understanding of not only what's airborne during that 5 minute, but what else could be resonating through the home. Yes.
There's mold on this planet. You're always going to have exposures to mold. When you take an air sample, what are you looking for? Because we know there's going to be mold in it. So what does the air sample ultimately tell you? When you get it back from the lab, what do the numbers mean?
Okay, that's a great question. Part of the protocol, since, as you mentioned, there is mold everywhere,
right,
is to take an air sample outdoors.
Okay.
You always have your outside influence. And I would tell you 99% of the mold assessment companies will look at any air sample, compare it to the outside baseline, come up with what they believe is normal or not normal. The objective is to have equal to or less than the number of mold spores indoors of any type of mold as you do outdoors.
Okay.
But based on what we talked about, mold spores following the laws of gravity, resonating through a home, you could take an air sample 20 minutes later and have a completely different result.
Right.
So as we talked about, they can help with cross-contamination, source areas, hidden mold. But even more importantly to us is what types of molds are consistently showing up in all our sampling and sampling methodologies, and what capabilities do those molds have from a health perspective? Which brings us to, we'll do some air samples inside of wall cavities. As you mentioned earlier, anytime you have a water event, water does follow the path of least resistance. Will work its way through walls and ceilings also. The home is one big living, breathing structure. Due to air convection, you'll have mold spores and other contaminants being pulled and in and out of wall cavities, ceiling cavities, the ventilation system. So again, inside of cavities are extremely important. Also, we take surface samples with a swab or maybe a tape lift from anything that looks suspicious, from a growth or discoloration or really bad moisture. We'll take a surface sample. Again, really helpful from the source areas that need to be addressed. But then we take on some more advanced type sampling methodologies.
Okay.
One of them is a dust sample, an environmental relative moldy index sample, often referred to as an ERMI.
Okay.
And this type of sampling methodology is helpful for many reasons. It's a collection of dust.
Okay.
From many areas, strategic areas throughout a home. And the reason we collect dust is mold, mycotoxins, endotoxins, actinomycetes, other contaminants, harbor in dust for extended periods. So it gives a really good historical perspective of what's going on in his home, even all the way back to the bill. Also, the analysis protocol, which is DNA formatting, is the most advanced protocol utilized by the lab where the mycologist can see a lot more types of mold with this type of protocol than they can see with the basic microscopy protocol for an air or surface sample. So they can see a whole host of additional type molds with the DNA formatting, again, harboring in that dust. The ERMI also provides 26 common indoor water damaged molds. They provide the species or the DNA of the mold. And it's the species or DNA of the mold that provides us the opportunistic nature of the types of mold we're dealing with. Certain species are capable of producing certain mycotoxins, that byproduct or chemical that's a poison that can impact people in very negative ways.
Okay.
Also provides us 10 common indoor molds due to the outside influence. Of those 26 common indoor water damage molds, 14 of those are capable of producing that mycotoxin. Just an analogy I always like to use, and I'm a sports fan, so I use a baseball analogy. With the basic microscopy protocol for an air or surface sample, the mycologist can see the starting 9 players on a baseball team. With the DNA formatting, which is utilized by the mycologist for the ERMI, they can see the starting 9 players, the backups, the coach, the manager, peanut salesman, parking lot attendant, and so on and so forth. So the moral of the story is the mycologist really can see a lot of additional types of mold that can be impacting the home and or your health that they can't see with just the air or surface samples.
Yeah, and
So go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
no, I'm glad you're talking about the ERMI because another benefit is it can even take the fragments of these mold spores that under direct examination you're not going to be able to tell what type of mold it's from, but when you DNA format it, get a much better idea of what species that fragment came from. And so, and again, I'm glad he's talking about ERMI too, because it's pretty controversial sampling methodology in our industry for some reason. Junk science, if you will. Is that what a lot of assessors have called it, Al, with us? I think I've heard that phrase quite a few times. But at the end of the day, when we have all the data back, it all matches up. Usually the ERMI matches up perfectly with what we're finding in our wall cavity samples, in our air samples, in our swabs. All the data matches. So it's really important step to help us understand, again, the history of the house a little better, potential of cross-contamination, and then what type of spores or mold spores are coming from these fragments throughout the house, which it's really important because they're ultrafine particles, those fragments, and again, easier to infiltrate our bodies.
Very true.
Well, information is power, right? Information helps you and everybody involved see the bigger picture. You are taking these samples and composite samples and trying to tell a story with it. No different than a crime scene investigator, right? I mean, in a sense, what you just described to me reminds me very much of that. I love true crime.
Same
and that's
here.
what they come in and do. They analyze the environment. They use a multitude of different tools and methods to collect information. They send that information back to the lab. The lab, under the microscope, analyzes it, sends it back to the investigator to come up with a scenario and to paint the picture of what may be occurring or what may have occurred in this environment. And then that information is useful and to a remediator like me, because ultimately what I need to know and what the homeowner ultimately wants to know is what happens next. right? Like, what do I do? I have mold. I don't have mold. Insurance companies telling me I don't have mold, and so, my husband thinks I'm crazy. I don't feel good, all this stuff. And then they get the data back, and it really just justifies their intuition, or their body's telling them something. It's justification in a lot of ways that there is a problem here. These samples show are elevated quantities of molds in this environment, and they didn't just accidentally get here. They came here through an event of some type, and maybe they've collected over lots of different events, over lots of different occupants in the home. Who knows? And for the most part, we won't always get the answers to all those questions, but from my perspective as a remediator, it does tell me, okay, this is where we need to start ultimately. And as you guys know, because you follow remediators like me, a lot of times your samples show us the where the body is, and then we open it up and find there's a whole lot more bodies. So there's been a lot of different situations occurring there. And so I get, whatever, people may have different opinions in regards to what samples are meaningful, but information is always
right.
Good.
Very true.
And using the ERMI for your crime scene analogy, it can be a perfect screen if homeowners, suspect something going on in their home, to let them know what molds have been at the scene of the crime, so to speak, whether or not they can be mycotoxin producing. In fact, a lot of our clients, when they call, they've already done an ERMI themselves, just because maybe they suspected, or their doctor or some other environmental consultant had them do it. So they already have that data. But again, that question again, Adam, where do I go from here? And that's where we try to do a deep dive and do enough testing to make it all make sense.
Back to the crime scene. At a crime scene, we leave DNA behind, right?
Yeah.
Mold leaves DNA behind as well. So that's
literally leaves DNA behind. Yeah.
Back to trying to figure out, like you mentioned, the source. Well, depending on the types of mold we find in that ERMI, helps us determine what type of water event we've had. If we see Stachybotrys or Chitomium present in the environment or in that ERMI, we know we've had a pretty significant moisture issue at some point, because both those do require 90 to 95% moisture levels to grow. So again, it's providing more information for us and for you when it comes to a remediation protocol as well. Also, if we see those species, again, we know we've had some species that are capable of producing very dangerous mycotoxins. Stachybotrys being the black mold and Chitomium being in the same family are very significant molds that can be extremely toxic. Which brings us to the mycotoxin test. That's a dust sample as well. The mycotoxins harbor in the dust. Same thing with collecting dust for actinomycetes and endotoxins. These are produced by gram-positive and negative bacteria. Where mold takes 24 to 72 hours to start to grow, the bacteria only takes 2 to 4 hours to grow. They both require moisture, normally growing right there in the same vicinity. And the actinomycetes, again, are capable of producing dangerous biotoxins, just as certain mold species are capable of producing dangerous mycotoxins. And the endotoxins produced by gram-negative bacteria are capable of producing dangerous poisons that can get into our body and impact our urinary tract, our gut, and our gut controls a lot of our body, including our brain. So that's back to that puzzle, and Sean kind of explained it a bit. What we find normally in our air and surface samples, right? We're looking to see how they correlate with what we find in our ERMI, how that all relates to what we're finding in the ERMI testing, and how all that matches up with what our clients are finding with their clinical testing with their doctors. And I would tell you 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time, what we're finding in the environment matches up with what our clients are finding in their clinical testing. So that whole puzzle works out very nicely and fits very well. It allows us to put together the protocol and scope of work for the home, for remediation companies. And also, it's great data for our clients to share with their doctors to potentially change or add to protocol and helping them get better.
Sean and I like to say this every episode. We aren't doctors. You're not a doctor. But just like every good investigator, you are gathering the doctor's
Data.
the information coming from the doctor. A lot of times you're speaking to these doctors as well as the clients, or even and in some cases, from what I understand, you're on the phone with both of them. You're collecting all the information, and you're doing so when you do make your way into the people's homes and do the field trip you talked about, you can go in armed with more information. And not that other companies don't do that, but it's a rarity, especially from that perspective. Because most people who find remediators, at least in my experience, they do so through the channel of, hey, my insurance company said I needed to get somebody out here, or insurance is driving the boat, and they don't even know ultimately what the dangers are potentially with this. So it is refreshing, and there's a lot of information out there now, and that's why me and Sean decided to start this podcast, so we could talk about this, to provide even more information for people, so they can find these doctors and find certified mold assessments and companies out there who are taking these things seriously, so they can figure out how to correct the issue, and move on with their lives, because nobody wants to ultimately be under the influence of this. They want to live in their homes and not have to think about it.
Sure.
And it can be exhaustive, and I talk to a lot of people out there who've been battling these things for years, and then ultimately finally get the information, and it's like, eureka. It can be life-changing for these people in a lot of ways, because their doctors have said, hey, take this pill, it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that, and ultimately it's that stinky air conditioning right over there, it's been blowing out who knows what type of spores and toxins over the life of it. So it is refreshing, and I know I'm probably getting too excited about it, and I don't mean to make light of it, but I see the relief in people's faces and hear them talk about it, pre and post remediation, how they're ultimately, been changed by the process, and just by the knowledge of what you guys have been talking about, unearthing all of this information and data, which paints the picture that they've been struggling with.
Sure.
Yeah, and we don't want to.
Passionate.
Yeah, we don't want to make it seem like mold is always the root cause of why
No.
what people are going through. There's usually other health problems they're dealing with, but mold is an opportunistic pathogen, and it's going to attack your weakest link. So if there's already health struggles that someone's dealing with, more than likely mold's going to exacerbate those struggles. So the one thing a lot of our clients have in common is we're not going in and finding small issues. I mean, we're finding significant issues in a lot of these houses that we go into. So there's definitely a correlation there.
Enormous correlation. Just like we're going to talk a lot about HVAC systems and what they ultimately can produce, and often you will find, if you are willing to look, they're the quality of construction, the types of materials we're using in and around wet areas. I often spend a lot of time talking to clients about that, because if we're tearing out a kitchen or a bathroom, the last thing I want is for them to rebuild it the same way that it was built to begin with. And I think you guys will see that too. As demand rises and supply diminishes, there's no incentive for these builders to go out of their way to build anything of quality. And what does that mean ultimately? This new house that you just bought 2-3 years out down the road, when your children are using the bathtub and they didn't protect or build the bathroom with quality materials, or extend the splash zone outside of the shower at all, and ultimately, build a bathroom that doesn't allow for moisture to exist in it, you ultimately end up having to tear out a brand new bathroom after a couple of years.
Showers are a perfect example of that. I can't tell you how many clients we've worked with that, the showers were the main source, and then they call us months down the road with the same concerns, because the shower was built poorly, right on top of their remediation. So it's a really good point, Adam.
Well, it's form over function. You know, they may look good. The kitchen may look incredible. Bathroom may look incredible, but the materials used in those spaces matter. Not just the surface materials, but the materials behind the surface materials, and the quality of workmanship and the craftsmanship and the thought that's put into building that space. What is the space? What is it intended for? It's intended for moisture to be introduced into the room, for you to bathe. And ultimately, it's like the materials in there aren't meant for wet spaces. And inherently, you're going to have issues down the road. So the education process doesn't just end at the remediation. It starts with gathering the information, getting the assessment, getting a quality assessment, a protocol where they're not just going to look where the insurance company told you to look. They're going to give you a all-encompassing view of your home, so you can decide, hey, here are my resources. How do I attack this? How do I correct these issues? And then after I do that, how do I avoid it occurring again? And those things, and we are going to parrot these things consistently, because it is important. I'm tired of tearing out brand new showers and kitchens. I'm sick of it. I feel terrible, especially when there's no real assistance from the insurance companies. Nobody's there to help the homeowner, and it's just the same story over and over and over again. And it's frustrating to me. It really is. And so again, new homeowners don't know. Old homeowners sometimes have no clue. And you don't know until you have to spend the money to do it, and then you're like, never again, never. So sorry, I get frustrated, but it does bother me, as I know it does you guys as well.
Yeah.
How often, Adam, do you open up a shower and find that the shower pan was installed incorrectly or not even installed at all?
All the time. And there's no consistency from one builder to the next, from one contractor to the next, from one sub to the next. They kind of do what they want to do. I am not a general contractor. Neither are you guys. There are different processes, different styles. Every contractor has their own way of doing things. There are certain contractors who push certain materials. There's 1,000 different ways to build a wet space, and not two contractors ever do it the same. And so consistently you see those areas fail, even if the pan is done properly. The grout job could be bad, or the tiles could be installed improperly, or there's too much grout to begin with, which grout is a sandy, absorbent material, which allows moisture to get in and under and behind the tile. And then ultimately, water will do wild things. Through capillary action, it will climb up and over and around and through and down into areas, just because that's what it does. It's going to try to get to where it can and absorb in as much material as it can until it can't anymore. And that often means outside of the shower, into materials that, for whatever reason, they didn't use water resistant materials right outside the shower. And then there you go. If you have baseboards that go up to your shower, 10 out of 10 times, if the shower has any age to it, if you pull the baseboard off the wall, there's likely going to be water damage and potentially mold growth right in those areas. And 90% of the showers are built that way. And it's like they use, inferior products, stuff that don't belong in showers, paint walls in bathrooms with flat paints and things like that, which allow absorption. Stuff that just seems like common sense that you wouldn't do. They do it because it's cost effective, or nobody, it looks better. And so that's not a good reason to do it ultimately.
How many times do you call out from a client 1-year warranty of their home is almost up? You go to a shower and there's a lot of integrity loss in the tile and the grout and the seal. How often do you see that?
Consistently. I don't know if I can put a percent on it, but the type of tile matters too. Porous stones don't belong in wet spaces. Travertine, which is, you see in a lot of really high-end houses too. It's like a sponge. It's like coral. It absorbs the moisture. Travertine with no sealant on it, with gaps and holes, and it's probably one of the nastiest and showers you'll walk into if it's not a sealed travertine bathroom or shower. I know you guys have seen hundreds of them, but it's, again, it may look good, it looks nice, and you see it on Pinterest or wherever you saw it, and somebody wants to build something that looks good, but that doesn't mean it functions well. And I'm a zealot now for little to no grout in showers, no porous stone in showers, sealing, epoxy level sealing your shower spaces. There's a lot of really intelligent ways you can waterproof a bathroom. There's no really one good way, but there are a lot of really good ways. And if you find a quality contractor who knows what they're doing, you can build a bunker that will last forever, or not forever, but at least hopefully outlast you in that environment, so you're not having to replace or tear out a shower every 5 years. I don't know if you
exhaust fans in the bathroom do you see terminating in the attic?
I asked you this, Al. Is an exhaust fan, the type that is in a bathroom typically today, is that enough to dry a bathroom?
Probably not. Especially not just one. But no.
Especially most people are just running it, if at all.
If at all.
But usually just during the shower. You get, in my experience, you need to run it a few minutes before and quite a few minutes afterwards.
Absolutely.
But usually you go up in the attic and the ducting is stretched, across the whole house. So it's probably not even pushing it through anyway.
So if that vacuums out some of the steam in the room, just what it comes in contact with, where does the rest of the moisture go? Into the walls, absorbs into the grout, into the tile, into everything that's in the bathroom, and the bathroom stays that way all day long if there's no real airflow, which most bathrooms have no airflow, no return air, and ultimately no real way to dehumidify.
Mm-hmm.
And waterlogged materials are going to expand and then eventually contract after they dry to the best of their abilities. I'm going to ask you a question. How many shower floors do you take moisture readings in where the shower hasn't been used in 30 days or more, and it comes back with moisture elevations in that shower? How often does that happen?
I'd say 50 to 75% of the time.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why? Why would you build a shower basin that's going to hold moisture for 30 plus days? Mold, bacteria, everything that you don't want in an interior environment is going to flourish in that space.
And the benches that they put in the showers only exacerbate the issue.
They're failure points. You don't want moisture collection in a space that's going to hold on to it and become another area or a ledge for moisture to. Yeah, and a lot of times they're just built improperly. The pan will be down here and the bench is up high, and water collects at the bench and it goes right behind the pan and into the surrounding walls, and then you're tearing it all out. And that it's unfortunate because it looks amazing and the homeowner's so happy, and the contractor doesn't know what they're doing and builds a something that doesn't belong in a wet area. As much as I don't visually like those old,
inserts.
No, not insert. I would say those old plaster bathrooms from days gone by, right? Those old tile, you have the mint green tile around the perimeter.
Yeah.
As much as I don't like the look of those things, I can tell you, because we tear them out all the time, they are superior in every way. Plaster is superior to anything we use today. And it just doesn't allow for the type of growth we find around even the newer, more water resistant types of materials like hardy board and dense glass and green board. Those are great, but the old way was better in a lot of ways. And eventually they fell apart when we see them. Usually they're in poor shape, but they lasted for forever. They lasted for 30, 40 years before they became an issue. And even with them falling apart, there's still not the level of visual mold growth that we find in a brand new bathroom that just got wet.
Yeah.
It's pretty telling.
There's a lot of really good modern waterproofing shower systems out there right now. that are far superior than your traditional, mud bed and shower pan system. So
Are they cost prohibitive, Sean? Why aren't builders doing that? Why aren't they using those more often, you think?
that I don't know.
Okay. That's a
But
good question.
if you're looking to remodel your bathroom, it's if it does cost more, worth the investment, I think, to at least do your research on some of these modern shower waterproofing systems, because they're far superior to the mud bed and shower pan system that we just
Yep.
talked about.
So I'd recommend too, and you brought it up earlier about having baseboards near your shower and bathtub.
Yeah.
Well, we've gone to recommending, and including my own home, having tile baseboards versus the wood baseboards,
Yeah.
and
I
even
tell
pulling
people,
the tile further up.
yeah, I tell people all the time, build it the way the YMCA would build their bathroom. Like, build it to get wet because it's supposed to be a wet space, and so that every material that you put in there, it can get wet and ultimately will protect the walls behind it and then the envelope of that bathroom from allowing moisture to escape into the surrounding walls. Because as soon as that happens, as soon as there's a chink in the armor, it's over, and water will find its way through and then in and around into your surrounding areas, and that's when this exposure starts, and that's when you guys get in there and see, or they smell, or whatever the issue is. Ultimately, they have a problem, and just because it isn't visible doesn't mean it's not there. So um that's why all of the information and all of the testing methodology you discussed, the cameras, all of the sampling methods, and I know you only went over a few. There's a variety of other things, as well, that people can do to gather information. And as technology changes, man, it's just giving us more reach in regards to figuring out why, and then hopefully coming up with a game plan to correct it.
We're still in the infancy stage of this. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, this is a new industry by all intents purposes. It really is.
It's really important to keep up with all the new information. Many times I'll hear from other inspection companies that have been doing this for 30 or 40 or 50 years, and they don't do anything differently today than they did 30 years ago or 40 years ago. And just like any other type of situation, right, you can never depend on what was true 50 years ago
Correct.
is true today. And if you're not continually learning and changing, you're falling further and further behind. And in
Oh, they
our
were
industry,
they
it's
were smoking
important.
in airports, or they were smoking in hospitals not too long ago, weren't they?
Right. Very true. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And
things,
airplanes and stuff, yeah.
airplanes, and I remember going to Village Inn when I was a kid,
You have
and
coughing because of
there'd
the
be a
table
smoking
next to you, right?
section right next to where we were in the non-smoking section. Some guys, pulling it back heaters and drinking coffee, and I'm over there coughing, trying to eat my pancakes when I'm 9 years old. So thankfully, information
Asking your
has
mom and dad for a
changed.
piece of pie.
That's right. Yeah, mom, dad, you know, just coughing all over my pie. So yeah, I mean, change is good, information is good. It's all useful if you're looking for answers. And I think a lot of people who find this and find us are should gain something from the fact that there are people out there who are asking questions and trying. We don't have all the answers. None of us are perfect. And we're constantly trying to stay on the leading edge of the information that's out there to try to do a better job for all of our clients, and in doing so, spread that knowledge to you guys, because now the questions to ask. Maybe and by the way, if you do have questions, put them in the chat, subscribe, tell your friends about us. If you want to open up a discourse, our contact information is below, and we'd be happy to discuss your issue with you, and reach out to us.
Yeah, you can also find us at the Mulch Show on Instagram. If you have any questions, send us a message there. We'll do our best to get back to you, or we'll take some time during the show to answer the question. So
Definitely, this is interactive. We are on here, to talk about it, to have an open discussion. But we're also in the industry, so if you are in need of testing or remediation services, reach out to us. Our information is also available on our socials and down below here in the YouTube page. So if you'd like to have a one-on-one discussion, please don't hesitate.
Al, thanks for joining and walking us through that consult process. Hopefully it's helpful for anybody listening and wondering what the next steps are.
I can't wait to have you on to talk about the remediation process and the do's and don'ts and what you see and how remediators like us can get better at what we do. I'm really looking forward to having and furthering our discussion, not only about additional testing, and what you're seeing out there in these homes and businesses and commercial buildings, but what you're seeing in the remediation world as well.
Good.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to the Mulch Show. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Have a great evening.